Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a subroutine that takes parameters. Someone actually emailed in and asked me if it's possible to do that, and it certainly is, so I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It brings up the point that if you guys have questions, visit excelvbasequel.com and go to the contact page over here. Click on contact and just send me a message, and I'll get back to you, and I'll put up a video like this. Hopefully that person is going to watch, and they'll find it pretty cool. Okay, the other thing I want to say is at excelvbasequel.com you could watch a whole bunch of videos. So there's like 5 hours. I'm going to put more up. Keep sending in your questions, and I'll keep posting. Okay, so let's get started. So the question was, can I write a subroutine that takes in parameters and does something? We know that a function, let's go to the, I press Alt F11, I'm in the editor, and let's go to the code window. So here we go. Project Explorer, I'm going to add a module here. Let me just call this module something. I'll call it sub with parameters. Okay, so I have my module here, and we all know what a subroutine is, right? That errors because I didn't put the name. Okay, so we have a subroutine here, right? And we've seen this before. If you watch the other videos, you know that you could write code in here, and it does stuff. And we've also seen things like this, function, name, and what this function will do is it will, let's just say, is equal to x plus 1. Actually, x as integer. So we've also seen that there's things called functions, and functions take in a parameter. So this parameter is a integer variable, and its name is x, and it's going to take that x and just put it in the cell. So I'm going to change it, and I'm just going to put x plus 500. So this is a function, right? I just named it name. It could be anything. I don't know why I named it name. I'll just do plus 5. I'll name it plus 5. So this is a function. When someone says what is a function, say it's a machine. It takes in input and it spits out something. So let's see what plus 5 does. This should be review, but let's just see. Plus 5, there it is. I put in 100, and click OK. So I got a circular reference here. Where is my circular reference? This is probably in my function code. Let's see, active cell.value. Ah, I see. Sorry, I'm not thinking here. I am not thinking. Sorry, I haven't made a video in a while. I am not thinking. So I'm just going to copy plus 5, and what that error was is that when you have a function, the return value, you need to assign it to the name of the function, right? I'm sorry about that, but it's a good good lesson. Okay, so plus 5 is going to be equal to what is passed in plus 500, okay? And that's the big change here. The name of the function plus 5, you have to assign it something, okay? Okay, so let's go down here and do this again. If I just go here and I press enter, now I get 600. Okay, cool. So we see this, right? A function takes a parameter. In our case, it's an integer, and it could be anything, any integer, and it returns 500 plus that integer. Okay, that's cool. That's a function, right? Okay, so now someone emailed in and said, well, I know a function can do that. He said, I know a function can take a parameter and return something, but can a subroutine take a parameter? And the answer to that is absolutely. Now, what I said before is a function is a machine. It takes an input and it gives back an output. So here's the input, x as integer, and here's the output. x plus 500. Okay? Input, output. So a function returns something. It returns plus 5 is equal to x plus 500. When you do a subroutine, it doesn't return anything. Okay? It just does something. So in a subroutine, you're not going to do something like with parameters is equal to x plus 500. So let's try this just to show you that this is not going to work. Okay? So we wrote a subroutine the same way as a function. Okay? And let's see if this works. If I go here and I go into Excel and I go equals with, it doesn't even show up, right? It doesn't even show up. With parameters doesn't even show up. It's not even, it says, it comes back with an error. Okay? So that shows you right away that a subroutine, it doesn't return anything. It's not like a function. But a subroutine can take a parameter and it can do something. So what do I mean by that? I mean this. I mean, when you have a subroutine that takes a parameter, you're going to use it in this way. You're going to have another subroutine like main, sub main, and in this subroutine, you got to do this. You got to go call with parameters, and then you pass in your integer 500. Okay? So what this does right here, call with parameters, it's sort of like a function call, but it doesn't return anything. Like I said, it just calls this routine to do something. Okay, so when we step through this main, you'll see it's going to, if we step into this, debug, step into, okay, so if we step into this, oops, let me stop this. Oh, didn't know I lost that. Okay, so if we do that again, call with parameters, this is a correct call. I call this subroutine and I'm going to pass it something. Okay? Oh, I don't have the edits. Here we go. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I haven't made a video in a while. I lost track of the debug toolbar, and this is the debug toolbar. Sorry. Okay, so I step into main, right? Here's the call. So what happens? It goes down into the subroutine, and look what happens. It says argument not optional. Okay, so why is it throwing this error? It's throwing this error because I can't call this, I can't use a subroutine. I can't assign it anything. I can't assign x plus 500 to the subroutine. It's not a function, okay? So I can't do this. I have to erase this. So I'm going to stop this. And this is okay, okay? This is all right. This sub with parameters, x as integer. Passing in a parameter to a subroutine is fine. Just like you do a function. You put with parameters and then you pass in your parameter. What you can't do with a subroutine is you can't assign it anything, okay? So instead of that, you have to put something like active cell.value. This is sort of why I got confused at the beginning because I haven't done it in a while, but this is what the difference is, okay? If I make this call now, let me minimize this. Okay, so I want you to see the cell if possible. Okay, so here's our cell. And if I make the call now, and let's step through, I make the call. Okay, so it's going to go to that subroutine. Okay, so it made it. It passed in x. And if I put a watch on x, here you go. You see that the value is passed from, here's x in memory, on the computer's memory. X is in memory as 500. And that's because 500 was passed in as x right here. Okay, so this passing a parameter into a subroutine definitely works because I passed 500 into this parameter x, and there it is in memory because I put a watch on it. And now the subroutine, if I do one more, it certainly added 500 to the value. Okay, so that is how you pass a parameter to a subroutine. It's very similar to a function, except that you cannot assign anything to the subroutine. You actually have to do something. In our case, what we did was we took what was passed in and we assigned it, or we assigned it to the active cell. Okay, you don't necessarily have to use x. I mean, I could put this. I could put 5500 here, and if we step through this again, if we do that right there, I passed in 500 and x was assigned 500 in memory, but I didn't use it. So you don't have to use what's passed in, but really, when would you do that, right? You're passing it in for something. You're passing it in to use it. So it's a good idea to do this, and it's a good idea to do this because when you're writing long code, you don't want to write a one subroutine that does a million different things. You could break up your code by calling other subroutines just like this. Okay? And if you have parameters you want to pass into that subroutine, you could do it just like this. You can pass in a parameter, and you can do stuff with it, whatever you want. It's just a variable. Now let's do something else. Let's do dim x as integer, as long. Okay? So instead of passing in 500, let me pass in x here, and up here I'm going to assign x equal to 78,000. Okay, and then down here what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say x times 2. Okay, so what did I do here? I want to show you that just like I passed in a static value like 500, you can also pass in variables. You can pass in all the variable types that you use in VBA. You could pass in doubles, longs, arrays, ranges. You could pass in anything to subroutines, just like you can functions. So let's just make sure this works, and let's see. So I believe that is because this is a long, right? So the variable types have to be the same. So now it overflows again. And okay, can anyone answer why this came up? Why did I get this error? This is video number 1. It overflowed here because integer only takes values up to something like 32,000, right? So let me do something here. I want to pass in 78,000 here. So I'm going to make this a long, make this 78,000, and make this a long. It's a good refresher course. And now let's do this. Okay, 78,000 is passed in. Down here you're going to see this value is going to be 78,000 times x. In memory we have x equal to 78,000. Again, I hit enter and I get 156,000, and the sub ends. Okay, so that is how you pass parameters into a subroutine. That's pretty cool, right? Okay, so let's do something a little bit more practical, maybe, that uses more parameters and does a little bit more and refreshes your concepts of looping. Some of you might dislike looping and things like that, but because it's so heavily used in VBA, I'm going to write a little thing here to show you about passing parameters into subroutines and go over the looping concepts again. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. Oh, I won't get rid of it. I'll leave the function in here. Okay, so I'm going to move those things down, and I am going to, let's see, what can we do? We are going to write a subroutine that will take parameters, and it'll take a parameter that is going to be the name of the sheet. So it'll go to a sheet, and then it's going to take another parameter that'll be the address of a cell, So it'll go to a sheet, and then it'll go to a cell, and then we're going to write two more parameters, one that is the number of rows and one that is the number of columns, and we're going to populate a matrix. Okay, so let's do that. So we'll be able to put a matrix on any sheet of any size, a matrix of any size on any sheet in any cell, starting at any cell. Okay, so how do we do that? Okay, so let's write a subroutine called populate matrix. Okay, and this subroutine is going to take parameters. It's going to take a sheet name as a string. That's going to be a string. It's also going to take a start cell, and that's going to be a string. And then it's also going to take a parameter called rows, and that's going to be long, and that'll be the number of rows in the matrix. And then it's going to take a parameter called cols, which is going to be long again, and that's going to be the number of columns in your matrix. Okay, so now we have our subroutine that takes in these parameters. So now we have to do something with it. So let me declare some variables. I'm going to declare dim xrow as long, because I know I'm going to need to moving over rows and columns, and xcol as long. And let me also do something here, dim matrix row as long and matrix col as long. Okay, and I'll show you where those variables are used in a second. So what I want to do is, on this worksheet, I want to put the index, the row and column of every cell in the matrix. So the first row for the matrix is going to be 1. So that's why I have mat row stands for the matrix row, and mat col is going to be equal to 1, 2. Okay, so the first cell in the upper left corner of the matrix is going to be 1, 1. Okay, so now let's do something. Let's start using these parameters that we're passing in. So what I'm going to do is go active sheet or active workbook dot sheets, and now I'm going to use the sheet name that is passed in, sheet name dot select. Okay, so right here I have sheet name. I'm going to give it something like sheet 1, and let me get rid of this watch box. I'm going to give it something like sheet 1, and it's going to select that sheet. Okay, cool. Now let's do active sheet dot range, and what we're going to put in here is start cell. Okay, so here we have a subroutine. I pass in a parameter called sheet name, and I select that sheet. Then I pass in a parameter called start cell, and I select that cell on that sheet, because this is the active sheet of the selected sheet, which is going to be sheet name. Okay, so I select the sheet here, and then I select the cell here. Okay, cool. So now what we want to do is prepare to build a matrix, right? Okay, so let's do let's find out what row we're in. So let's do x row, and I declared x row up here, is going to be equal to range. I'm just going to copy this. Range start cell. Instead of select, I'm just going to do row. And xcol is going to be equal to range start cell. Instead of row, it's going to be column. Okay. So now I have, what did I do here? I'm on my sheet that I want. I'm in the cell that I want, and now now I know the row and the column that I'm in. Okay. So now we could build our matrix. Okay. So let's put the loops in. We want to do until the matrix row, and remember matrix row is equal to 1, is equal to rows plus 1. Okay, so let's think about this. And down here, after we're done with every row, we want to set the column, because this is going to loop through columns in a second here. I'm going to put the matrix col equal to 1. And so what I'm doing right here is I'm resetting the columns. Okay, and I'll show you what exactly is going on here in a second. So I'm doing a loop to go through all the rows, and I'm going to put another loop right here, but I didn't do it yet. Okay, I just know that right here I'm going to loop through the columns, right? So I have to write another loop to loop through the columns, and I should put a comment here, loop through rows. So I'm writing the loop to loop through the rows, and I know that when I'm done with this loop for columns, I have to reset the column to 1. Okay, so I also have to increase the row by 1, and I also have to increase the matrix row. Right? And then I have to finish the loop. Okay, so all this stuff down here is just, okay, let's say I have 10 columns. Well, after I'm done with this code, which I didn't write yet, I'm going to be at column 10. So then I have to reset the columns to 1 so that the next row, the column will be displayed as 1. And then I have to increase the row to go to the second row, and then I have to increase the matrix row to 1, increase the matrix row to 2, actually. Okay, so let's write these. So this loop loops through the rows, and now let's write the one that loops through the columns. If you're confused right now, it'll make more sense when we step through it. So this loop is going to do until the matrix column is equal to the columns plus 1. Okay, and there's my loop. Now let's think about this. Mat call is equal to 1, right? And let's say I pass in 100. I pass in 100 here as calls. Well, since this is 1, if I did do until 1 is equal to 100, I would only have 99 columns, but I didn't want that. I wanted 100, so I have to do plus 1 here. That's why I did plus 1. Okay, so now let's write our code here. This is where we're going to display the index. Okay, cells x row comma x call dot value is equal to. So remember what I did. We wanted to know what row we're in and what column we're in. That comes from whatever cell we pass in. Okay, and we're going to start populating this matrix with x call and x row, and we wanted to display a number as text. So we use this function again, cstring, which has been used in other videos. And what I'm going to do here is put mat row, and then I'm going to put and a space, and then cstring again, and put mat call. Okay, so I can put a comma in here too. So what I'm going to see here is that I display a value, and then I have to go to the next column, right? So I put x call is equal to x call plus 1. And then I put mat call is equal to mat call plus 1, right? And then I'm done with the loop. Okay? So we're done. We just wrote a subroutine that takes a bunch of parameters, and it's going to put a matrix onto the Excel sheet. Okay, so let's see what it looks like. Okay, now maybe you're asking, well, why can't you just press run right now? Why can't you start debugging right now? So let's try that. So if you try to step into this, you can't. You've seen that. Look, I can go here and I could step into this, right? No problem. And that's because it doesn't have any parameters. Okay, so it doesn't expect anything. So you could step into that. Because this has parameters, I cannot put my cursor here and start stepping into it. You have to call this subroutine, like we did with this with parameters. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to comment this stuff out for now. I'll leave it in there so you could look at it later. And what I'm going to do is just call populate matrix. Okay. And now look at that. You put a parentheses, and here's all the parameters that we defined down here. Here's sheet name. Here's start cell. Excel is very smart. VBA is very smart. So when you define a routine, it goes into the VBA library, and when you call it, it's able to recognize that in the library, and you put a parentheses, and it shows you all the parameters that are necessary. Okay, so let's pass in stuff. So because it wants a string here, sheet name as string, I'm going to put in sheet 1, and remember to put the double quotes around it. And start cell, okay, let's start in C3. Okay, now how many rows do we want in our matrix? I'm going to put 10. And how many, and remember, you don't need parentheses or you don't need quotations because it's long. Okay, and how many rows or columns do we want? Let's just put 3, and there we go. Okay, so we now made a call to populate matrix, and this populate matrix, it's going to go to sheet 1 and then go to cell C3, because look, it goes to sheet 1 right here, and then it goes to cell, let's just step through. Okay, so let's step through this, and here we are. It made the call, and now it's in the populate matrix subroutine. And as we click through, let me just bring this down. Here we go, mat row and mat col is equal to 1. And so it's selected. I could do a watch on sheet name. Here, sheet name in memory is called sheet 1, right? And start cell, let's just do this real quick. Start cell in memory is C3. Here it is in memory, C3. So now let's select it. So watch this. It selects it right here. It selected C3. Okay, so now X row, let me just bring this down a little bit. So now X row and X col are going to be defined. And let me just do a watch so you can see what's happening here. X row is 3 and X col is 3. And why is that? That's because the start cell row, here's the start cell row right here, 3, and the start cell column is also 3. So you're in the third row and the third column on that worksheet. And now we have our loop, right? And mat row, remember mat row is equal to 1, is going to go until this is 4, right? Okay, so let's do this. So right here, we're in the loop to populate the column, right? And what do we have? We have cells 3.3.value is going to be equal to, now watch this. You step through and look what happened. Mat row and mat col are both equal to 1. So there's 1, 1, right? And now we increase the column here. So column is going to go to 2, and mat col is also going to go to 2. So we go through again, and if I move this over a little bit, now look at that. We have 1, 2. That's because mat row is still 1, but remember I increased X col and mat col, so now I have 1, 2 over here. Okay, so let's loop through again, and now we're going to have 1, 3 here. So we have 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And this is common notation in matrix algebra or linear algebra. 1, 1 stands for first row, first column. 1, 2 stands for first row, second column. So that's why I needed mat row and mat col, because those stand for the indices of the matrix, 1, 1, 1, 2, whereas X row, X col stands for whatever row I'm in. I'm in row 3 and I'm in column 3. Okay, so that's why I use those two different variables. Okay, so now let's loop through again, and it falls out of the loop, right? So now what's going to happen? So now we're going to increase, we're going to reset mat col to 1, and we're going to reset the X call equal to the start cell column. So start cell column is 3, right? So it's going to go back to this column C, and mat call is going to be 1. Why is that? Because we want this to be 2, 1, and that's why mat call is going to be 1. So let's step through, and X row is now going to be 2, right? We want 2, 1, and mat row is also going to be 2. Well, actually, X row is not going to be 2. I'm sorry. X row is going to be 4 here. So if I loop through again, there's 2, 1. If I loop through again, there's 2, 2, and there's 2, 3. So you get what's going on here. So now and why is it falling out of the loop? It's falling out of the loop because I only specified I wanted 3 columns, right? When I pass in the parameter. So let me just run this, and look what happened. Okay, I have a matrix in this worksheet that is 10 rows by 3 columns, and all the indices are correct, and those loops did that, right? Okay, so now let's do something else. Let's try to mess around with this a little bit more. So we just put populate matrix on sheet 1. Now let's call it again on sheet 2 and on sheet 3. And I'm going to put just Z1, make 100 by 100 just to show you, and let's do D70, 80, 9 by 13. I don't know. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is just run this. Okay, I'm just going to run it, and then we're just going to take a look at it and see what happened. So I run it, and it's populating all these matrices, and here we go. On sheet 3, if we look at this, I said go to sheet 3, go to cell D70, and here's D70, right? There's row 70, column D, and make a matrix that's 9 by 13. And here we go. Got 9 rows, and I have 13 columns, right? And all the indices are there. Okay. On sheet 2, what do we want? Oh, this is a big one, right? So I said go to cell Z1 and make a 100 by 100 matrix. So let's check it out. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. This is row 1, column 100, right? And if we scroll all the way down, we're going to get to 100 by 100. So there's our matrix. That's 100 by 100. Okay. And now let's go to sheet 1, and there's our let's see, what do we want in sheet 1? Oh, I didn't change anything. So I said go to cell C3 on sheet 1 and make it 10 by 3. So there's our 10 by 3 on sheet 1. Okay, so there you go. There's a use of using parameters in a subroutine. Okay. Now, if you're asking, is that practical? Do people do that? You know, I didn't know exactly what the person wanted who emailed me, so he didn't really specify. So I just wanted to show you that it's possible, and I figured that building a matrix is pretty cool because it you use loops and things, and it's good practice, right? If you can understand what's going on here, it's sort of intermediate VBA, where you have to reset your indexes and you have to find out what column and row you're in to make those make the matrix look like it looks and make it look good. You're pretty good. You're in good shape if you can do that. If you can understand that, and if you can write that off the top of your head, you're going to be good. If you go into a job interview, if you're going to be trying to code some more advanced VBA script, you're going to be able to do it. So that's the code for that. Now, you might ask, well, okay, go one step further and get rid of the matrix, clear it out. So okay, I can do that. Let's write another subroutine, and let's call it clear matrix. Okay, and what this is going to do is just take exactly the same parameters that I just had, and I'm going to put it here. Okay, same parameters. Now, what do I want to do here? Well, all I want to do is say active sheet dot range. Oops, actually you have to. I want to copy this stuff here. I want to go to the sheet, right? I just want to go to the sheet. I want to go to the cell, and now what do I want to do? I want to do this. I want to do range start cell, and now what I'm doing is building a range with variables. And so you do it like this. You know how you do a range like A3 colon B5 or something? You could do the same thing with variables. And when you want to build it, you put the ampersand and then the colon in quotations, another ampersand. So this is my start cell, and what is my end cell going to be? Well, it's going to be the active cell. So it's going to be the start cell, and then I'm going to offset the number of rows -1 and number of columns -1. And I want the address of that, right? And I want to select that whole range. So what this big line of code does is it says, okay, let's say I pass in start cell is A3. So it'll go to A3, and then it'll build a range. It'll say, what is the range upper left address? It's A3. And what is the lower right address? Well, I just want to offset that start cell, right? I want to offset the active cell, which is start cell, the number of rows and the number of columns. But I want to put -1 in there just to make the range correct, and I'll show you that in a second. And then all you have to do here after you select this range is do selection.clearContents. All right. Okay, so let me just change this to matrix. So now all I have to do, I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to just copy this and put this here. Instead of populate matrix, I'm now going to clear this matrix, right? So let's see how this works. I'm going to step through. I go into clear matrix. And now watch this. Okay, here is my sheet. I select the sheet right there. So after I hit that line, start cell.select, it selected this cell here, C3. That's because I passed in C3 into here, which was up here, right? Right here. I passed in C3 into here. It came in down here and selected that cell. Now, here I want to range, right? So start cell is C3. It's also the active cell. So if I do start cell C3 colon and then the active cell offset rows comma columns or cols dot address, what's happening here? Look, I just selected this range. You see that? How it's highlighted? That happened right on this line here. Okay? And the tricky part is this thing right here, right? Because I offset this cell right here, this 1, 1, cell C3. That was the active cell. And because I had 3 columns, if I would have put in here to offset it just 3 columns, because cols comes in as 3. So if I offset it by 3 columns, it would have went like this. It would have went 1, 2, 3. So this highlighted thing would have been out here. That's why I needed to subtract 1 and only offset it 2 columns. So I wanted, go to this active cell, offset 2 columns, 1, 2. That's all I wanted, right? And the same thing with the rows. Active cell is here, I had 10 rows that I passed in. I wanted to do a matrix of 10, and if I just put 10 down here, I would have highlighted down to this row, because I would have went 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, and 10 would have been right here. So that's why I needed to subtract 1 to trim that range so that it's exactly the numbers that I wanted for a 10 by 3 matrix. Okay, so now the only line that's left is to clear the contents, and when I hit that, there it is. The matrix is gone, right? So what we have here is these are subroutines that take parameters, and if I just run this, here I'm in sheet 3, right? And let me just show you. I'll just put a bunch of things in here. I'll just put some letters in here, and I'm gonna just put a breakpoint here, right? You just put a breakpoint in this gray column here, and when I run this, it's going to end up on sheet 3, and you'll see that it's cleared, right? It cleared that out so that then it could populate this. So I just wanted to show you that that's how you use these parameters in different ways, right? Hopefully it's useful to you. Hopefully you can take a look at this code and you could understand it. Like I said before, this might not be the most practical application of passing in parameters. However, I believe that if you can understand basically two things, I think you understand that you can pass in parameters. I mean, that's not hard, right? It's just like a function, only you can't return anything. You don't assign anything to this function, to this routine name. You actually do something, right? They're just like variables. You pass in these variables and you do something with them. But this video really it stresses really this loop here again. I know we went over it before, but if you can understand this and if you can write it from the top of your head, I think you'll get a good understanding of, you know, the worksheet as an object. And if you go into a job interview and they say do something for me in VBA and you write that, I think you'll be well off if you can make something like that in a short period of time in a job interview or something. And that's what you should do if you're looking for a job or something. Bring your computer in and, you know, get this stuff down and write some stuff in front of the person. Say, hey, can I take out my computer and can I show you what I can do in VBA? And they'll be impressed. And they'll be more impressed if you can take this stuff here and just build more stuff. So the other tricky thing is, okay, those loops, that's very tricky. Try to get that down. The other thing is this offset thing, and actually the building of a range with variables, right? That's sort of a tricky concept because it's dynamic, and you can do a lot of stuff with that. You can offset, you can select the cells, and all kinds of stuff. So really practice. If there are two things in this video to take away, actually three. Okay, you understand that you can pass in parameters to subroutines. Number two, try to understand what's going on here, right? Think of this little thing as this. If I just do range, you know, A3, B3, right? Same thing here, right? This is what's going on. The range takes a range of cells separated by a colon. That's all a range function does, right? Now you can replace these parameters, this range parameter, by breaking it up with variables, and you don't put the parentheses around the variables. You don't do this when you have variables in it, because the variable holds something, so you don't need parentheses. And then you put ampersand, and then the colon, and another ampersand, and then your other variable. Now this variable here goes from here to here. It's very long, but that's because they're using this offset function on the cell, right? So you could really put in another variable here that's much shorter, just end cell, right? And then you can erase that. So what I can do just to show you, let's do this: dim end cell as string, and I'm just going to do this: end cell is equal to so there you go. This probably makes a little bit more sense. You have a start cell, colon, end cell, right? Let's see if it works. Sure does work, okay? So that's that's a tricky part. Okay, so three things: you take parameters into subroutines, make sure you understand what's going on here, start cell, end cell, variable, using variables in a range function, and then understand this loop thing and try to do that, from the top of your head. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you got something out of it. Like I said, I'll be posting it on excelvbasequel.com, and I'll post all that source code so you can download the workbook. You don't need to write all that code. You can just download it and take a look at it on Excel VBA SQL. Check it out. There, I'm telling you, there's a lot of good content here. If you're struggling with books, if you really want to learn VBA, this is where you want to do it. I'm not trying to joke you around or try to get you to waste your time. The reason I created this site is so you don't waste your time, so that you learn exactly what you need to learn and understand the concepts. And you definitely will if you watch all these videos. Download the workbooks and play around with them. Okay. So once again, go to excelvbasequel.com. Contact me if you have questions, and download the workbooks and take a shot at it. Okay, bye.